Welcome to another episode of Foxfire Farmhouse, the podcast. We are glad that you've joined us either once again, or maybe if this is your first time, we're glad that you showed up here. I'm your host, Josh Bartels, joined by co-host and friend, Elijah Heyman. Welcome.
Hello. Hi.
So how's life been for you?
You know, it's been good. Honestly.
Holding it together.
Yeah, it's good. Still no internet.
Still no internet.
That's the only update that the podcasters will
Ladies and gentlemen.
know.
Please petition the President of the United States
Yes.
to sign an executive order demanding that all of Washington State be covered with internet by next week.
I like it.
That would be...
It will definitely happen.
Right. So, that's not happening, but it's a nice thought.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll have internet by the next time.
Yep, that's the hope.
Yeah, indeed. So what have you been watching? What's been cool?
Oh,
What's your
been
cool
cool
stuff?
Oh, well, this week, since we're still on the DVDs, I have a DVD set of the HBO miniseries, John Adams.
Really?
Yes.
I have never heard of this before.
It is a 7-part series with Paul Giamatti as John Adams. And it is I honestly think it's very historically accurate. And it's done very well. It's got that same kind of, it's obviously a bigger budget than something like The Chosen, but it does like the same thing where it makes the people real. And we have more information, obviously, as the daily lives and the daily letters of the founding fathers than we do the apostles. But it shows them like even covering the front door with a curtain during the winter, like little things where like that way they keep the cold out, like just little things which make it really cool. But they capture all of the inner conflict between the founding fathers and their need to rely on each other, and they really show the need for revolution, which I think is it's a subject that's on the forefront of a lot of people's minds right now as to not being represented and all that jazz. So it's a good little watch.
Cool.
Yeah.
So it starts before the Revolutionary War. Does it go to his childhood or does it start as an adult?
It starts as an adult with him as a lawyer, and literally starts with the Boston Massacre, because
Okay.
he was John Adams was the lawyer for the British soldiers
Really?
in that trial, and they were all acquitted because of his defense.
That's
And
fascinating.
nobody was willing to take him, but he proved that might have been some people from the Sons of Liberty kind of stirring up some trouble
Okay.
on purpose.
Interesting. And
Yeah.
where does it end? Does it end then with him as president? Or
I believe so. I don't really remember. We're still working our way through it. I watched it a long time ago, and there's little bits of content. It's an HBO miniseries, so have your wits about you, but it's not prevalent.
Cool.
I think there's maybe one scene in the whole
I'll have
series.
to check that out.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's on HBO Max.
It probably is.
Is it?
I think it is.
I will have to look that up because
It's
that
good.
sounds like a fun
Yeah.
series to go through right now.
Yeah.
So today I had a news story come across my social media feed
Ooh.
that I've been digging today and sharing with a few people. And so I'm going to bring that up.
Share
It's a
away.
story coming out of Russia about a boxer
Mother Russia.
who was fishing with a pal and was down at the edge of the water.
Mm-hmm.
And a brown bear comes out of the woods and attacks them. Kills his friend. R.I.P.
Mm-hmm.
His friend is dead.
Wow.
Apparently he had a firearm of some sort. The news story does not specify. But he unloads 4 rounds into this bear. But the bear still keeps coming after him.
Whoa.
Knocks the gun out of his hand, so he has no gun anymore.
Mm-hmm.
He pulls out his knife and fights this bear to the death. A fisherman who was out on the water heard the commotion, comes in, and when he gets there, this Russian boxer, is finishing off the bear, slicing the throat. This boxer is just lacerated to shreds after this fight with this bear. But now he's in the hospital, obviously torn to pieces,
Yeah.
but survived an attack from a brown bear and ends up finishing it off with a knife by hand.
So freaking manly.
It's
awesome.
It's the best. It's like,
yeah.
that's what
Men
you
can
do.
still be men
When the bear kills your friend, you kill the bear.
with almost your bare hands.
I think it counts. It's
It
like
counts
going
as
all
bare hands?
Davy Crockett, right?
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, it's not quite David level,
No.
Wait a second. Did David have the sling for the bear? I don't remember if it specifies.
It's almost Samson level. I think Samson's probably
Yeah, there we go. Just grab the lion and rip it apart.
It's so cool.
It's awesome. So that I've been digging that story all day today.
That's awesome. I mean,
I love it.
That's horrible for that person's family.
I know, yeah.
But
no, it's certainly tragic. But his name is Denis Shibotar, and he's 41 years old, and just totally showed that bear who's boss.
He broke the bear.
Yep, he broke the bear. The bear is
Rocky
no
reference.
more. And in fact, actually, the story says it's straight out of like a interspecies Rocky film.
There
is
you go.
what they reference in the story.
Gosh.
So they pulled that out.
Jeez.
Yeah, so today's topic, what we wanted to jump into today is actually not per se a topic, but rather a movie. A movie that we have referenced before and that we both love very much.
It's a good movie.
Made by Joel and Ethan Coen. Their movie, Hail Caesar.
Oh yeah.
So walk us, what's the basic plot line of Hail Caesar?
So the basic plot line, as the front of the title card reads, it says lights, camera, abduction. And so most of the story falls along this thread of, I don't know, what time would you say, 1950s,
Yeah, probably
late
50s.
50s.
Yep.
And it's around that time of like the Ben-Hur epics, and they're making a Ben-Hur epic. But the whole movie takes place behind the scenes, and there's these rogue communists that abduct the lead actor, and a lot of hilarity and drama ensues with a lot of really cool other characters floating around there, like a cowboy who gets put in another role in one of those like anti-mame kind of style movies where he has to be very like proper, and he's struggling with it. It's again another one of my favorite scenes. There's so many good scenes in this movie, and shot beautifully as well. So, I mean, the movie, the main character is what's the guy's name again?
George Clooney.
George Clooney.
Oh, you mean the main character in the movie?
Yeah.
So the main character
Josh
in
Brolin.
the movie is Josh Brolin. His name in the show is Eddie Mannix.
Yes.
And he is the studio fixer.
Oh yeah.
The fixer is the kind of slang term, but would he be a producer or a studio head, like a kind of a studio executive? But he's not really the executive either.
Yeah, I think that he would probably be. I think he would be a form of a producer.
Yeah.
But I think back then, I think he's probably what they're trying to portray is that there's some middle areas, because the producers are in New York.
Right.
And he calls them the producers, so he works on all the films. He's just the company man, and he helps make movies happen.
He just greases the wheels.
Yep.
Make sure that things happen.
Gets rid of roadblocks.
Yep. And that's his job throughout the film, is to get rid of all sorts of roadblocks.
Yep.
And he's just got to protect the image of the studio, make sure that the people on the pictures keep at it, and that they find the abducted movie star, who is played by George Clooney, and he is the Baird Whitlock is his name, and he is the lead Roman centurion in their movie that they're making called Hail Caesar.
Yep.
So it's a fantastic movie. It's a really hard movie to explain the plot of.
Yeah, there's so many little threads that all intertwine, and some of them honestly don't really. They're just there.
A lot of them don't contribute to the plot other than showing the complications that Eddie Mannix has to deal with.
Yep. Because the plot really isn't. It isn't really about the abduction. It's about Eddie Mannix and his desire to do something fulfilling and something good.
And in that way, it's a very character based movie with a lot of characters.
Yes.
And a wonderful array of. It's a
star-studded cast.
It is a star-studded cast, but it's not like something like Knives Out, or where you've got an ensemble who are playing together. They all have at the center of them Eddie Mannix in the studio, but they don't all interact in the film.
They have their own arcs, for sure.
And so it's like following multiple stories through one theme.
Yeah.
And it just, if you're looking for a plot-heavy movie, you're going to come in and you're going to be disappointed, and it's not going to be what you thought it was. But if you're coming in ready to take the movie on its own terms, it's a delightful watch.
Yes.
Every
certainly.
time.
It's so good.
How many times would you say you've watched it?
I've probably watched it upwards of 20 times.
Really?
I've
Wow.
watched it many times, and most of those times were in the space of like 2 years. So,
I have watched it at least 6.
yeah,
But I definitely have not watched it 20 times.
I've watched it quite a lot.
We're
Fave.
gonna take it. Do you use Letterboxd?
I don't. I was actually wondering what that app was called, so I could.
Yes. It's
can use it.
so for our audience, if you are a cinephile or an amateur cinephile and you want some kind of record of what movies you've watched, there is an app called Letterboxd, and it allows you to keep track of what movies you've watched, and it's easy to find them. It's easy to use. It's the easiest way I found to be able to track my movies.
Sweet.
And so I'm able to look back and see what I've seen, see what I've been watching the last year, how many movies I watched, things like that. And so it's really good. And I was just going to pull it up and see if there was some way for me to see at a glance how many times I had seen any one given movie, but I do not see that, so I'm not going to have those stats. But it's really good. So let's talk about what is then the character story, the character arc of Eddie Mannix.
Well,
Let's give that plot.
He's a man who's good at his job. That's the thing. And that's a theme in those old 50s movies. He's like, I'm good at my job and I do my job well. And so he's good at his job, but he's struggling with like the monotony of just being good at his job. And he's like, where do I go from here? Like, where do I find the value in what, like, he's given another job offer like close to the beginning of it. And he's wondering if the juice is worth a squeeze for hanging out at the studio, and he's given a job offer with, I think, Boeing or Lockheed or something like that.
Lockheed Martin, that's right. Yeah.
To work on some like nuclear stuff. And they offer him a lot of money, and they're saying like, this actually has value, like, and you're going to do something that's important for your country. And so the whole thing follows him just going, well, is that of more value than what I'm doing right now? And it's him finding value in the work that he does and in movies in general.
Right.
Which is why
He
I
is-
love it.
Yeah. He would have benefited from listening to podcast number 1 of the Foxfire Farmhouse. Why
Movies matter. He wouldn't have had to struggle.
He wouldn't have struggled at all.
No. He would have been like, I can make it through because of Josh and Elijah.
Yeah, he would have been listening to the podcast on the episode if it was not 1950s. He would have been listening to the podcast while he's running about his day.
Listen through a gramophone.
Yeah. In his office. He's got a vinyl copy of our episodes, and he's listening to them.
Yeah, I don't know how many vinyl
Be a
discs
lot of
that
vinyl
would
discs.
be.
So what I find so interesting about it is that this is a real struggle for him. Not only is it a economic struggle, because he has to ask the question of the economics of it. Lockheed Martin gives him this great job offer. They lock in the contract for 10 years. They're giving him the option to retire at the end of 10 years and be set for life.
Yeah.
They really want Eddie Mannix. He's good at managing production, and they want him to manage theirs. So they really want this guy, and they're willing to throw whatever they have to at it to make it happen.
Whining and dining.
Whining and dining him. And he, in the middle of all of this, is struggling back and forth with several different problems on the movie set that seems kind of like taking care of like being the dorm dad to a bunch of college students is kind of the role that he has
crazy
to
lives, just doing things that are hurting their careers, and he's the one who has to clean it up for them.
And the movie starts early in the morning with him. I think it actually starts with him at confessional. Is that where it begins?
Yes.
And then it goes from confessional to then him dealing with a movie star problem at this is like 4 in the morning, really early.
Yeah.
So his day starts early. He goes throughout the day, comes home for dinner, has to go back to work to kind of deal with this whole problem. So he's working through the night to make the studio keep ticking and get things moving.
Yep.
And there's that struggle of, what do I do? I haven't seen my kids at all today.
Wasn't able to go to the baseball game.
Yeah. Forgot to call his son's coach. Just little things that he's not able to do that would not be a problem at Lockheed.
Yeah.
And so there's the stress level, there's the economic level, but then he goes to confession later that night, again with the father, and he asks the father he's like, how did he word it? If something is easy, does that mean it's bad, or if something is hard, does that mean it's bad? And he said, yeah, I've got one thing that's easy that would be great. And then on the other hand, I got something that's really hard. This job that I'm doing that's very hard, but it seems right. And the father just basically says, well, God wants us to do what is right. And he's like, yes, he does. And then he settles it there, and he goes out and he does his job. And so there is all dimensions of his person who are struggling with this decision. It's a spiritual decision. It's an economic decision. It's a personal decision. It's a professional decision.
Yeah.
All of these aspects are coming together to decide, do movies matter? Am I going to commit my life to it? And then in the end, he decides to do it.
Yep.
And I think that on that level, I have to admit that I love the movie so much for that reason.
Yep.
Because I identify with the struggle so much. Now, I'm not in movies,
Yep.
but there's constantly that sense of, should I even care about them like I do? Should I try to make them? Should I try to work in any kind of movie industry?
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of selfish reasons or personal reasons why this appeals to me.
Yeah.
That kind of bypass some of those plot issues that other people might have with it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a pretty good recap.
And on the art of the movie, what is so beautiful, why I think it's such a delightful watch, is because it's so quick paced. You have characters moving in here and there, and then it will slow down and spend time on a musical number that is being performed on one of the sound stages.
Yep.
And then there's a not interpretive swimming. What do they call that? The
synchronized swimming.
Synchronized swimming.
Yeah.
There's a synchronized swimming scene that's super cool. There's a tap dance number.
Yeah.
There's odd
Channing Tatum.
Yeah. Right. There's just so many odd, quirky characters and quirky circumstances that you get to watch and that end up playing out and paying off later.
Yeah.
It's just such a beautiful film. And one of my favorite moments in the whole thing is in the editing room. And if you should just go watch it, but I'm going to describe it now.
Yeah.
He's going into the editing room to see how things are going with Hobie Doyle's movie that he's been doing with Mr. Lorenz. And Mr. Lorenz is super frustrated with this cowboy who now is thrown into this picture that is a classy picture.
Would that it were so simple.
It's such a great scene. You should look that up at least just for itself. But he is watching the reel, and the lady who's the editor is sitting there, and you see you're watching with Eddie Mannix this scene, and suddenly the picture goes bad and the sound slows down and everything is messed up, and he looks over and her scarf that she's wearing has been caught in the machine and she's just choking.
She's like tapping the reverse, like reverse.
And so he has to reverse it to kind of get her back out of the editing machine. It's just delightful.
That's what I love. Like a big part of why this movie plays, and I think we'll get into that. There's more people than directors, but the Coen brothers know how to like make things seem like real or at least grounded. I think grounded is a better term. Grounded, and allow for other layers to be in things. Like allow there to be comedy and some very serious moments. Like you'll see that in like some of their darker films, that like something horrible just happens and somebody like does something awkward where like they trip and fall over or something and they're like, oh, sorry. Like people are like fallible, and like the lady gets her little thing caught in the reel. Like who thinks to put that in there? Like she has this little scarf and it gets caught in there. Like that's just a funny little thing. And
humans have all sorts of little ticks that
little
make
quirks,
us real and real people.
Yep.
And it's just beautiful when they're all put in there so well.
Yeah.
So I love it. It's delightful.
Yep.
So we wanted to talk a little bit about the different roles on a film set, since this movie is set on movie sets and we have the opportunity. We want to talk just in brief about the different roles and what part they play in the making of a movie. Because when you're thinking about a movie that has been made, you have to ask the question, who made it and who is responsible for this movie being good. And there are so many different fingers involved in a movie. It's not like a painting. So if you have a painting, I'm speaking out of my depth here, but I think it's pretty clear that there is a painter who painted that painting. And we don't ask questions with a painting like, oh, who made your canvas? Right?
Yeah.
Now we might ask who made the frame right? That it was ended up being framed.
It's a beautiful frame.
Yeah, but as far as the canvas, we're not asking, oh man, who created the paints or who mixed them. We're assuming that the majority of that work was done by the artist, and that the things that other people contributed didn't actually make a difference in what it looks like.
Yeah.
It's really a question of materials and tools. But with movies, it's such a collaborative art and a collaborative medium that it's really hard to say who made this movie and who is responsible for what. And so you have to just be aware of the different actors, not actors, but the different people involved in the movie set in making the movie. So we just wanted to run through some of the big names and kind of talk about them for a moment. Yeah. So who's the first one?
First one that most people think of that we've talked about a lot is, well, like I just said, directors. Director is basically like, in your like common layperson terms, honestly, their role is like a supervisor. Like their job is to supervise the whole film and to maintain a vision that they're after, and that's their whole thing, is that they need to remain focused and on point with the vision, and make sure that shows up, and knows how to direct people to make that vision a reality, knows how to utilize all these other terms that we're going to talk about, the cinematographer for it, whether or not the director is a cinematographer or not, because they're not always behind the camera, and that's the thing, that they're not always controlling it. Sometimes another person controls it, and they're still a good director, and they're not always the person who writes the movie, and sometimes they do little changes, but most of the time that's a separate person. So yeah, the director's job is to direct the actors, and the whole production, including editing, pre-production, post-production, all of that. The director is in charge of that, making sure it goes well for the producers.
There's a whole lot of discussion about who actually makes the movie, and I think really the director, depending on the given film and the director's style, but I don't think there's anyone on a movie who has more say over the final look of the picture than the director.
That's true.
That the director is involved in every other art form. We're going to talk about the rest of the people here in just a second, but all of them end up looking to the director for the types of decisions that really shape the tone and the feel of the movie. Now, depending on a director's style, a director might turn over a lot of the creative control to the individual actors and the individual people, to where they don't really have any say in the script. They don't really have any say in the music. They're just trying to manage a big production and make sure it gets made. Yeah. But those movies often don't have the same integrity that a movie that has a strong directorial presence does. Yeah. And so the movies that have the strong presence of a director who's been overseeing and making conscious creative decisions throughout the whole thing about every individual piece to make sure they all work together in one whole to serve the story, then those are the ones that are strong. Yeah. Now that can be overplayed where the director is actually micromanaging the whole thing. Kubrick. And he's not. Yes. And he's not then, which Kubrick did it well though. So he's an exception. Yeah. But if you micromanage the whole thing and you're the one, basically if you're the one making the music, you're the one doing the editing, you're the one doing the filming, you're the one doing the sound design. If you do all of that, then it's impossible for you to be as good as a Hans Zimmer at composing. Yep. And so having Hans Zimmer, but giving him strong direction, or even choosing who your composer is half of the battle there. And then directing from there. That is what's going to give the strength to the picture. So the director is really kind of the
directors have to be good leaders.
Absolutely.
Like you can't have a weak leader director. Otherwise, the weak leader directors usually end up making big budget films. Yes. Where producers are really the ones who call the shots. Right. So that's,
in which case, if it's a studio picture, that's studio executives who end up making those kinds of calls. Yeah. And then it's mostly to serve an audience or a focus group, not to make good work. Yeah. So anyway, so let's back out to the producer. Yeah. What does the producer do?
Producer are the primary financiers of the whole film. They're included in the studio heads. They're included in whoever has decided to give their expertise and give their money to the project. And you'll see that typically very front and center on most title cards.
Yeah.
Like it'll be produced by Martin Scorsese. He's all over those, and sometimes even actors will be producers. Like Tom Hanks is all over things. And then depending upon the director and depending upon the studio, sometimes they have a lot of say in films. Like if you know Marvel, Kevin Feige, he is the executive producer, and he handles all the Marvel properties, make sure that there's continuity through the whole brand, and that stories are good. So you can have good producers like that, and you can have bad producers where they lock directors out of editing rooms and they want what they want. But yeah, that's their primary function, is to finance and to maintain the brand of the movie.
Yep. And these are the people who are going to find the finances.
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones who really, if the directors are the ones responsible for the product that gets made and what it looks like, the producer is the one responsible for getting it made.
In the first place.
They're the ones, they're often some of the first people to touch the movie.
Yeah.
And they get it started, and then a director will be attached.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea is either coming from a director, if they're a director-writer, and then they're trying to push that through, or there's a script, and they're trying to match that script with the director to get a product made. They're the people who are putting this forward,
Yeah.
and making sure things get going.
Yeah. Like yeah. So like
So then,
sorry, continue.
Oh no, go ahead. What do you have there?
Yeah, like I think another example is like you're saying, if they're like, if you think of the Star Wars situation, I think most people know
right.
about the directors changing with Star Wars. Some people, maybe
This was
our
with
listeners,
Solo. This was
with Solo, with almost all of them, the new ones, they were switching directors in between, but still the movies were going to get made, and so that shows you that there's a force behind it. That's that force that's still making
I
the
see what you're
movie.
saying. Yeah.
So it doesn't really matter who the director is. Very rarely, not very rarely, but if a movie's being made by a director and it has that a lot of times that singular vision, most of the time the director is also a producer.
Right.
In most every film that somebody directs, they have a financial stake in the film.
Yeah.
So
then you've got producers, you have directors, you've got the writer. There's someone who comes on in the beginning. That's pretty obvious what they do. And this sometimes means you'll see on IMDb multiple writer credits, and multiple people will touch the screenplay, and they're not necessarily. It gets complicated whose name actually gets added, and I don't understand that.
You can't buy original scripts. Just so you know, if anybody ever buys a script, it's not the original.
It's very often something that's been doctored by 3 or 4 people, and it's like I'm trying to think of a good analogy of what it would be like, but it's like buying a piece of property that has been kind of
developed,
customized along the way, like buying a car. You got the stock car, and then this guy put a spoiler on it. This guy changed the rims. This guy put a turbo in.
Yeah.
And now you're getting it as this finished custom piece. That's kind of how often movie scripts go. But in the case of writer-directors, it's different because the director is able to hang on to the story and kind of do what they want the whole time.
Which is a bit more rare on like the mainstream to get a writer-director. Like Tarantino, I think, is the biggest example of...
Well, him and Christopher Nolan.
Yeah.
Nolan often does a lot of his own stuff.
Writes
so you've
with
got...
brother.
Or like Rian Johnson. Rian Johnson wrote The Last Jedi and directed it. He wrote Knives Out and directed it.
Sweet.
So you've got a writer.
I didn't know that
Rian
Johnson wrote his own movies.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
So you've still got some of those people. So who else do we have? Who would be someone else? So there's an assistant director. The assistant director is often, as I understand it, involved in schedules, and it's kind of he's the sub producer who is totally responsible or totally underneath the director.
A lot of times they'll do like some stock action scenes or whatever. They'll sometimes roll into that second unit director thing.
Yeah. So there's multiple small
there's
roles,
editors,
but we'll jump into So editors are on the back end.
that's some people's job, is just to edit.
And often they get the dailies. They're the ones who process a daily is a term for the footage that comes from that day. They take the footage, they process it, and they'll start cutting it as the movie is being shot, so that then the directors can see whether or not they need more footage or whether or not they need to back off.
Piece all that together.
And so the editor is responsible, like it says, for taking all the footage that has been shot on set and putting that together into the final form of the film.
Yeah.
You've got the cinematographer or the director of photography who is responsible for the image. They're the ones who are probably second to the director most responsible for the look of the
Yeah,
film.
that visual style.
Yeah, they're the ones who are coordinating a lot of the details with the director.
Mm-hmm.
Underneath them, you have the camera department and the lighting / grip. I guess it would be probably lighting, camera, and grip.
Yeah.
And so grip are the people who are building the the structural things that are needed to support the camera and the lights. The electric and lighting, they're the ones who are responsible for the lights themselves that get set up and where the lights get put. The director is responsible then for all of that, or the director of photography is responsible for all of that, because all of that contributes to the look of the film.
Yep.
And then there's camera department. They are the ones obviously who are running the camera and operating. And then you've got the DIT, the DIT, Director of Information Imaging Technology.
Yeah.
And he is the one who did different things in the past, but right now with digital technology, they handle the files that are coming off of the camera and make sure that those files are taken care of and duplicated and backed up and sent where they need to go to the editor and such.
Yeah.
Who else do we have? Who am I missing? Oh, sound recordist.
Yep.
/ boom operator.
Oh yeah, we mentioned them. Their job is just to get the sound and make sure that it sounds right.
Yeah.
And it doesn't sound like it's coming out of a tin can. Sound design is pretty important to make sure that the location actually, like, they're thinking about location sound. They're thinking about like what they're gonna have to add in later and all of that stuff. So their sound is very important in film. And then that kind of leads into the composer and obviously whatever orchestra or however they do that. And the director works with all of these roles and has usually a good amount to say to hand in hand with that composer and determining that audio feel that they want coming out of a film, which is why I really like Coen brothers. They just have like the bet, like they just know how to pick really good people. Like Carter Burrell is the guy who does all of the the Coen brother films, or a lot of them,
right?
And he just makes beautiful scores. And same thing with what's his face is the DOP, the
Roger Deakins. Oh man,
he's the epitome of what everybody wants to be.
Yeah,
like he's like, I don't know, he's like the all-star. Like everybody looks at him. He's like the Michael Jordan of cinematography.
And he has a podcast, and you most certainly should be listening to his podcast and not ours.
Yes. So pause and then go to his.
It's called the Roger Deakins podcast.
Really?
I think that's what it's called.
Wow.
No, it's not. It's I take that back. I'm gonna find the name of it.
Yeah. And then you have your animators, like if you're going to be doing CGI.
Team Deakins podcast.
Ooh, Team Deakins.
And it is a gold mine of information on movies. And
that's awesome.
This, let's see if I can find what episode number this is, but they have done now hundreds of episodes during the pandemic and have talked to so many people. They've had Josh Brolin on. They've had everybody. So it's a wonderful, wonderful podcast.
That's so
and
cool.
I highly recommend it. If you're a film nerd, that's the podcast you should definitely be listening to.
I should be listening to this podcast just as everybody who listens to this.
Yep. Maybe that should be my thing I'm into at some point.
Maybe that'll be my thing I'm into next week.
Yeah, let's do it.
Magically. But yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, who else were we missing?
Animators
kind of big.
/CGI.
Animators.
That's big today.
VFX.
Yeah.
And there's a difference. So there's a difference. The special effects, technically, if you call it special effects, it's effects that are happening on set. So if there's an explosion,
VFX,
if there are,
that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. If there's, people have to be on cables, things like that. All that special effects,
stunt work,
VFX, visual effects, are computer generated effects added in post.
Yep.
And so you have the VFX artists, you have the special effects artist,
demolition experts.
Yeah, and then there's a whole subcategory there of different people who are involved. You have the one really important one we missed is the set designer, or there's another term for it.
Costume designer, set designer.
You've got costume, set, makeup, hair. Those people, I would say then underneath the DP are the third most person who's most responsible for the look of the film, because they are the art director. That's something. The person who's in charge of kind of the look of everything that's physically there. Yeah, not the look of how it's captured, but the actual set dressings, the props,
they absorb all of that concept art that usually comes into, at least when you're talking about bigger films, they absorb all of that and just like,
There's a role that I learned about on the Team Deakins podcast called the prop master.
Ooh.
And he's the guy or gal who are responsible for if there's a cake that's being like served up on the scene.
Yeah.
He's the one responsible to say, how many cakes do we need? Because how many takes are we probably going to do of this thing?
Oh, man.
And so he's the one responsible to make sure that anything that the actors are touching, that's his job. So if there's going to be guns on set, if there are going to be cakes,
multiple weight hammers,
forks,
for Thor,
stuff like that, that's his job, is just those things that the actors interact with. And it sounds like a fascinating job.
Like fun. Yeah. That'd be so cool. It'd be like, I just built Mjolnir today.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
Acquired Mjolnir from this contractor. It's pretty cool.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So there's a host of
So
other
many
jobs underneath this. This is why the credits roll for 5 minutes at the end.
Yeah.
And if you ever want to find baby names, go there.
That's where we went.
If you ever want to find random jobs that people do on the movie sets, go there too.
Now you guys know what a grip is.
Yep.
And there's riggers and there's all sorts of crazy things.
There's the key grip. There's the best boy grip. There's all sorts of interesting
So many
titles.
different things.
Go check it out. Have fun. There is somewhere
There's a spider coming down right next to you.
Oh, hey, look at this. Since we have a video podcast, you're going to have to come check this out as this spider drops down to hang out on my iPad, but I think I'm going to put him on the floor. Anyway.
Sorry.
Yeah. There are also spiders on sets very often.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're done visually through visual effects. Other times they're special effects. But, in this case, ours was a totally in-camera
real
effect. This was not VFX for real.
It wasn't a puppet.
No puppets.
Either.
No, there were. I know you couldn't tell, but there was no little people inside there moving those arms.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's our random talk about Hail Caesar and a walk through some of the roles on a movie set.
Yeah.
As we close, Elijah, what is the role on set that you would want?
Oh,
what do you want to do?
What do I want to do?
Do you want to be the boss man at the top?
I do. I want to be a director.
Absolutely. That's what I want to be too.
/ screen. I want to be a writer director.
Nice.
/ DOP.
I dig it.
I don't have the skills, but I would love to do all of those things.
Yeah. I think director for sure, and director of cinematography would be a runner-up. So we just like being in charge and dominating, and that's why we started our own podcast. And
that's it.
That's the end of the story.
It's the rule of 2.
Right. Well, thank you for listening to the end of this podcast once again. It is wonderful to have you hanging out here with us.
Yeah.
You can help us out by giving us a review on your podcast platform of choice. Share this podcast with your friends, and we'd love to hear from you. Ideas for future episodes, comments on previous episodes. You can reach us at podcast@foxfirefarmhouse.com.
And please, write the review.
Write the review.
Don't just leave a cowardly 2-star. I saw that.
Tell us why you think it's 2-star.
I would love to. I'm sorry. I don't want to offend you. But you left it hanging open. Please tell me what I can work on.
That's as bad as a 5-star.
I feel like this is like a breakup. I'm like,
well, thanks again for being here, and we will be with you next time for episode 6.
Goodbye.
Bye.